bass.
Welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine. If you enjoy this programming, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Join Truth and Rhythm's membership program through Patreon. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk. Shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm. I'm honored to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership iconic funk, R&B, jazz, and rock drummer Steve Ferrone. Among his seemingly endless list of musical accomplishments is being a member of Average White Band from 1974 to 1982, serving as Chaka Khan's primary drummer from 1978 onward, and beginning in 1994 serving as a member of Tom Petty's Heartbreakers Band. Other top artists he has worked with, recorded with, include The Emotions, Brothers Johnson, Jeffrey Osborne, George Benson, Teena Marie, Stanley Clarke, Steve Winwood, Mick Jagger, Eric Clapton, Anita Baker, Bernie Worrell, Etta James, Marcus Miller, and Johnny Cash. Steve, how are you?
I'm tired from all that work.
It's quite a list, man. Very impressive. Congratulations on all of it.
Thank you.
Where are you today, Steve?
I'm in my studio in Los Angeles. You can tell by the mess. Most people like you look how nice and tidy your studio is. Mine gets like that every once in a while, and then it just sort of explodes or implodes, whatever's going on. You know?
Well, it looks like a working musician to me.
Yeah, I got my little jazz kit. There. I go and play a jazz gig. Tuesday mornings at 8:30 in the morning, I go and play jazz at a place called Jones Coffee Roaster in Pasadena. I know, it's unbelievable. 8:30 in the morning.
Wow.
When they told me about it, I had to go see it just because I couldn't believe that they did it. And it's jam-packed in there now. They love it.
Well, that's great. That sounds like a good way to wake up to me.
Yeah. I have to wake up pretty early. I mean, it's usually over in my storage. I'm going to do it again next week, so I just brought it home because I didn't want to have to go all the way over there and load it up again in Burbank. And yeah,
well, good.
I get up about 6 o'clock, stagger around for a little bit, take a shower, and then go over, load up the drums, take them out there, set them up myself. You believe that?
Wow.
And break them down myself too. I don't know what it was.
That reminds me of the stories like Robin Russell. I don't know if you knew the drummer for New Birth. He used to go set up at Griffith Park like at sunup and play for people out there. And it was amazing to me that he would do that. Well,
you keep hearing that dinging. Somebody keeps messaging me. I don't know what about. I don't even know how to silence on this thing.
I'm actually not hearing it, but
I'm hearing it here.
There does seem to be a little bit of a latency on your audio, though. But other than that, I'm not hearing that sound.
Latency? I got latency?
I think so.
Yeah, but I don't know. There you go.
Well, hopefully I won't talk over you too much because of that. But So, hey, so good to have you. Been a fan for so long, back to, the very beginnings of AWB. And, I wanted to talk about, to start with, just to get it clear, Steve, you first worked with folks like Freddie King and Brian Auger, and was Bloodstone before AWB or concurrent, or how did that work out?
Well, I met Robbie McIntosh when I was about 17 years old from Average White Band's original drummer in Italy. And I was over there playing with a band called Mouse and the Traps. And Robbie was playing with a band called The Senate. And he and another guy, Alex Lidgetwood, they stayed in a little pensione right off of Via Veneto in Rome. And I moved in there with a bandmate of mine, and we hung out, all the four of us. A guy named Calvin Bullen, myself, and Robbie McIntosh and Alex Lidgetwood became great buddies, and we were friends for a long time. Then Robbie went and joined a band called the Piranhas, and I followed him into the Piranhas, and then he went and joined Brian Auger, and then I followed him into Brian Auger, and he was with Average White Band, and eventually I followed him into Average White Band, but not under such nice circumstances that had happened before.
Absolutely. So, but your professional experience before Average White Band did include Brian Auger, right, and Freddie King, and
yes, but I was working with I started working with Brian Auger in London. After leaving, I was at school in the south of France and working with the band in this band, the Piranhas, in the south of France. And then I started to work with a bunch of studio musicians called a band called Gonzales. And so when I traveled to the United States with Brian, and then came back to England and started to do little sessions here and there. And a guy named Mick Eaves had this band called Gonzales, a tenor saxophone player. And he said, "You want to come play with the band? It's a studio musician band, and what happens is that when somebody leaves town or does a session and can't make a gig, you go in and you play, and then it's your seat until you can't make the gig, and then somebody comes in and replaces you, and then you have to wait for them to leave." And so, fortunately, at that time, and I was playing, I was in one of my periods with Gonzales. We played at Ronnie Scott's club in London, and a producer named Mike Vernon walked in and said, "I want this band to record with Freddie King." So it was actually my first real recording date that I did as a studio musician was Freddie King's album Burglar. Pretty good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And were you pretty steeped in the blues?
Well, I started playing with the blues band when I first started playing in Brighton. I played with a band called the Web. Originally we were called the Flames, and then there was another band called the Flames, so we had to get a new name. So they came up with the Web, which we should have laid claim to that. The Web. We probably worth a fortune now. But we had this song called "Calling Black Spider," and so they said, "Well, let's call ourselves the Web." So we became the Web, and I played with them, and they were older than I was. I was like 12 years old when I started playing with them, and all these kids were like 18, 17, usually kids that were beat up kids my age, but because I could play music and I played with they liked the way I played the drums, so they became my protectors, and in becoming my protectors, they went to my mum and they said, "Listen, there's a blues concert coming through town and they're playing at the Dome. Can we take your son with us?" And my mum said, "Yeah, sure, take him." And so I went down and I got to see all the blues tours, learn about guys named Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee and John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters. And I'd sit there and watch those guys play. and but he thought that it was if I'd have known what I was watching, I would have paid more attention. Because it was, but I really enjoyed the shows. So we used to emulate that music quite a bit. I was more of although I can't say I wasn't a fan of the Beatles. I was more of a Stones fan because they sort of lent a bit more towards the blues. However, the Beatles did play a lot of the same stuff as what we did when they were in Hamburg. I think all the bands played like a lot of Chuck Berry and a lot of blues stuff. Even if we didn't know what it was, we were playing it, yeah. So that was kind of where I was with it all. So yeah, blues drummer, I guess.
So you were already good friends with Robbie when that tragedy struck. Was there any doubt or much doubt that you would come into that chair, or were other people considered?
I never expected to get that chair because I was actually employed. I was employed by a band called Bloodstone here in they were making a movie and an album, and I got to play on that here, and it was the same producer, Mike Vernon, that was the producer for that. I was hanging. I mean, Robbie and I were friends, old friends at that point in time, and he invited me to the party, he invited me to the gig, and I mean, I'd seen Average White Band perform before, and as a matter of fact, Gonzalez even opened for them at a gig at Easter at the Roundhouse in London, and I loved Average White Band. I thought they were great, and then Robbie had passed away, and I went round and saw the guys, and we were sitting in this hotel, not very far from here, about 8 miles away from here now where I live, and I said, you guys can't stop now, man. They were just starting to get airplay with Pick Up the Pieces, and I said, Robbie wouldn't want you to stop now. You got to keep going. And what happened was that I offered to help them out any way that I could, and they said, well, they had a gig that they were doing. Could I come and fill in? And I said, sure. So I went and rehearsed with them, and then did a show with them. I did the shows when I could. They weren't doing like tour. They were doing spot gigs here and there. So they were opening for Billy Cobham, and so I went and did a couple of shows with them here and there. And when I couldn't do it because I was working with Bloodstone, Stix Hooper would do it. And then they started to audition. They started to audition drummers. And we were invited down. Me and Stix, we went down and we'd sit there and we'd watch these guys. There was a line around the block, people wanting to come and play with Average White Band. And these guys would walk in and they start to play, and we'd watch the band get depressed. and then in between the people that were being brought in, we go and jam with them, and cheer them up again. Because they would just get really miserable. They were really, really unhappy about the fact that they sit down and play with someone and it just wasn't working, didn't click. And so we go and I go and jam with them, or the Stix would go and jam with them. We'd have some fun, and then so if I was doing a gig with them down at Long Beach Auditorium, and after a very successful gig, it started off a little bit. People used to, we walk out on stage and people would say, what's this? They didn't know what to expect. They're expecting like a black band to walk out there, and here comes the Average White Band, and they were actually 5 white guys and me. And so there was a lot of, we ran across a lot of people that would sort of sit there with impress me sort of attitude, and they're sort of homing on somebody that was like moving their head a little bit, and then it would sort of spread out from there, and next thing you know, everybody was dancing, and we convinced them. And after the show, this little dapper little guy came walking up to me with a sports jacket and a shirt and a tie and a little glasses and a little beard, little goatee, and he spoke like that, that New York sort of growly thing, and he came up and he said, "You got to be in the band." And I said, well, I'd love to. I just had a great time. It was really cool. But, I'm under contract to another band. I can't join the band. And he said, you're out of that contract and you're in the band. And then he turned around and walked away. And I thought, who the hell is that? And then Bruce McCaskill, the band's manager, was standing there. And I said, Bruce, who's that guy? And he said, that's Ahmed Erdogan, chairman of Atlantic Records. And I was out of that contract and I was in Average White Band.
Whether you wanted to or not, it sounds like.
he knew what he was talking about. Yeah.
Wow. And you went in and you cut that first record, Cut the Cake.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that experience, cutting that album? Was it, kind of mixed feelings, and what was the chemistry like?
Well, I mean, I've been playing with the guys. I mean, we look, Robbie and I had an affinity for the same kind, being brought up in the same kind of music. We listened to a lot of R&B, a lot of Motown, and that's what we liked. And that's what we did. We made our own, I guess what they called it, blue-eyed soul. We made our own kind of music. And when I started to play with them, it wasn't that difficult to fit in. I mean, we all came from the same place. And so, like I was saying, people would sit there and say, oh, it comes this band. And then they'd realize that the band wasn't just imitating R&B. It was meaningful. It was authentic. And so that's what made AWB a lot different from a lot of the other bands that were flying around at that point. It jumped on the Blue-Eyed Soul bandwagon. That we were original, authentic, and so it wasn't that hard to fit in. We went to New York, and I got introduced to Arif Mardin, and who was an amazing producer. He had a way of being able to, when you were running something down, he'd take you to a few bars. He said, "That's what I want to do the entire song, right there. That's it. That's going to be your focus." And so we go on and we play those songs. And he was an amazing arranger. He could arrange it. So the way that he arranged records were, he put strings and horns and all kinds of stuff on the recordings. But when we went to play it live with six pieces, it wasn't like you were missing anything. He had an amazing ear. He was a very funny guy, and very unlikely looking. He didn't really look like a record producer. If a record producer looks anyway, sort of imagine like a long-haired sort of guy with smoke sitting there puffing on a joint or something. This was like straight down the line. Short hair and a suit and tie, and
all business.
all business, and knew his business too. He really did know his stuff, and because I'd been to music school, when he would come up with something that he liked, so I could remember what it was, I just jot down where that pocket was for me. I write it out, and he noticed that I read music, and he said, "Listen," he said, "I noticed you read music a little bit." When we finished the album, he said, "I'm going to be doing some sessions. Would you come and play some sessions for me?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do that." And that's when I got introduced to making music with what I call the School of Local 802 in New York, playing with musicians like Will Lee, the Brecker Brothers, Joe Caro, great guitarist, David Spinoza, Hugh McCracken, Richard T, all these guys, just wonderful players. That really, Marcus Miller, guys that would help me. I had good instinct and for music, and they would help me through. They teach me. You learn what worked and what didn't, But basically, that was where I learned about my craft, about what I do now, which is taking a band full of a lot of musicians and pulling them together, making that band a unit, and be sitting in the center of the band. And I learned that through them.
Let me ask you, Steve, about I gotta say, Schoolboy Crush is one of my all-time favorite all times. You know, I do top funk tracks of all time radio show, and in the first group I chose of the 12 of all time, I had Schoolboy Crush in there among the 12 all time for anyone. And do you remember when that group first came together? You still perform it and keep it alive. So
I think Hamish started to play the bass line. He was just playing boom, 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 do 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 do, and I started thinking Marvin Gaye, for some reason, and it started boom boom tack goom goom tack goom goom tack goom goom tack, and it all, and then Alan came in with the guitar thing, and we had the groove before we had the song, and so that was basically it. That was the pocket was there, and then all we had to do was just basically it's a blues, with a little different sort of kick for the chorus that goes around, just get away from that beat for just a little bit, play something else. But the thing that seems to always interest everybody is like, where did those sleigh bells come from? And some we cut the song. It took forever. I mean, we did a lot of takes. I don't know. I always say like 26 or 27. I've heard people say 34, 35. We tried recording that track, and it would just not hang together. It's something that hangs together very, very in a very specific way, and it would start off all right, and then it would end up not so good, or it would start off great, and it would start off not so good and drift into it. But to get that and hold that atmosphere for the 3.5 minutes, however long it takes to do that, it was challenging, and we worked on this thing all day, and finally Ari said, "Look, I tell you what, let's just forget about this today. Go home, do what you got to do. Go out, go over to Eamon Duran's and have a couple of drinks, and go blow out a little bit. Do whatever you're doing. Come back tomorrow. We should nail it, early on." And so we came back the next day and went in there and sat down and said, "Let's just run it down and see if we remember the arrangement and everything." And we ran it down, and we said, "Okay, let's do a take." And we played the take of it. And we went in to listen to it, and it did the same thing again. It just didn't hang together. I'm like, oh no, here we go again. We got another day of this to get this track. And Gene Paul, our engineer, said, "Do you want to listen to the run through?" And we listened to the run through, and there it was. So it was one of those things. It was really hard to capture that moment for that song. But it was well worth it in the end. I love listening to that song. I don't get tired of that at all.
That's exactly it. I get tired of even a lot of the greatest songs that I like, but that one I never get tired of. I mean, people sometimes say if you could have one song play when you enter a room, for me it might be Schoolboy Crush. I mean, it's just amazing. It really captures, Yeah, I mean, that's really what you're trying to do when you're making a record, is capturing a moment. And that one, and it was painful to get to, but it got there. Yeah. Well, it's definitely worth it. And one of the things about AWB in particular, Steve, I think that made them so unique was the ability of the band to just lay in that slow funk groove. A lot of the tracks were slower than some of the other contemporaries were doing, like Warmer Communications and Your Love's a Miracle and A Schoolboy Crush and So many of them were just a little bit slower.
Yeah, a lot of friends that I used to work with in France when we went and played over there, they come and see the bands and they said, man, this band is just so mid-tempo. It's like you don't do things fast. It was a mid-tempo band. It wasn't a ballad band, but well, I mean, even though we did have a couple of big ballads, "The Love of Your Own" is a big ballad, but it was definitely in there in the mid-tempo. And I have to say, the thing about Average White Band, we used to call it the treatment. We would give songs our treatment. We didn't just go in there and just play the song down. Sometimes some songs didn't really need much, but or like Schoolboy Crush, it just took that formula of finding these parts that would hang together and then letting the groove do it. It didn't need any fancy fills. It didn't need any fancy playing or fast notes. It just needed everything needed to hang in that pocket that was Average White Man, and that's what we did. We do that naturally when we sit down and start playing. That's what happens when I mean, Hamish came here a couple of years ago. We came here and we were working here in the studio, and just the two of us sitting down and playing stuff. It started to happen. It would just. It's a little quirkiness that happens when we all play together, and that's what makes those recordings of Average White Band so special, I believe.
So the interlock. I agree, Stephen. The interlocking of you guys, how you guys interlocked and locked in, and also the spaces in the music just gave it so much more.
Yeah, a lot of space. There was always a lot of space, and I always like leaving holes for people to put stuff in. And I've seen a lot of different people playing the Average White Band songs. I mean, the Average White Band is still going with just Oni and Alan Gorrie and Ollie McIntyre. I just spoke to Oni this morning, actually, and I've seen them play with a number of different musicians. But there always seems to be that point when they're playing a song and they'd be jogging along quite nicely that somebody will start thinking that they need to do something else. And they don't seem to have the faith in the pocket that we had when we played together. It doesn't need a fill. Forget, if you're thinking about a fill, don't play it. As a matter of fact, stop playing. That seems to be the guy asked me once, how do you play funk? I said, well, okay. When you're sitting there, he was a bass player. I said, you're sitting there and you're playing and it's feeling really good. Yeah. And you get this great idea and you say, man, when I get to that, when I'm going into that verse, when I go in that chorus, I'm going to play this stuff that's really cool, man. I'm going to be the next James Jamerson. At that point, stop playing. Don't play anything. Think it if you want, but don't play it and stay away from it and then start playing again. And the guy was like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then when I said, he said, yeah, I know what I'm getting at. And he said, then stop playing, don't play. And he said, what? don't play anything. Don't play that fill at all. And don't, as a matter of fact, stop playing everything. Just a beat, leave it empty. Let everybody expect it and then have nothing there. I did an album with Pat Metheny called Secret Story, and there was one of the tracks. I did part of the album. I didn't do all of it. There's a song on there. I forget what it's called now, but it's an amazing arrangement. And he plays this beautiful melody through this really complicated chord sequence, but it's very easy to understand the melody. And then he plays a solo, and he plays a solo over those chords. Then it gets to the bridge of the song. I'm sorry if I'm getting too technical for people. The bridge is a bit that has nothing to do with anything else. It sort of ties everything together. It gets to the bridge of the song, and if I was a guitarist, I'd look at the bridge and I'd say, this would be my place where I could play so many notes through there and be really impressive that I was playing what I would play through there. What does Pat Metheny do? He doesn't play anything. He lets the bridge play.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the stuff, man. That left a hole. That left a big space for this other stuff to speak and made him important once he started playing the melody again. Beautiful. Beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Less is more in that case.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you understand it so well. I mean, even later on when you recorded these records, that one, it was sort of a solo record for you. It was the Farm Fur.
Yeah.
I mean, those versions you did on that of those AWB tracks, I mean, just your killer.
But that all came together. You know, I owned a studio in Burbank, and half of the studio space was leased to Sabian Cymbals. They had their offices and showrooms there. And I'd been out on the road with Joe Walsh, and in the band with Joe Walsh were Dean and Robert DeLeo. And we became great friends. They're very funny guys, great guys. And we still are really good friends. And we were sitting around talking one day, and they started talking to me about Average White Band stuff, kind of like what you're doing now, and telling some stories. And they said, you know, we'd really like to learn how to play some of that stuff. And I said, well, you know, come over to the studio and we sit down and play. As a matter of fact, I got a couple of songs, like original songs, that kind of need that sort of a treatment to it, you know. So they came over. They used to come over to my studio, and we go in and I teach them Average White Band songs. Dean, when he first came in there, Robert's Robert, right? Great bass player. Dean is a great guitarist, but Dean said, you know, I don't really play rhythm. I'm not really a rhythm guitarist. And I kind of work out I don't improvise. I work out what my solos are going to be, and then I play those. That's the solos that I play. And I said, that's all going to change now. This is going to be a different experience for you. And I'll be damned by the end of it. You know, we do this. I think we played Cut the Cake, and Cut the Cake. You go da 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 da. Da 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 ba ba ba, bang it again, dang it, dang it, dang it. You don't segue straight into person to person, and Dean, and I looked at Dean. I said, "So you don't play rhythm guitar?" Yeah, and that was kind of how that. And then the guys from Sabian sort of heard us doing this stuff, and they said, "Listen, you want to come and play that for us at the NAMM show? Put a band together around that." So I asked them if they wanted to do it, and they said, "Yeah, let's play a gig. You know, we've been playing these songs, and of course, you know, they're not the musicians that you sit a chart in front of them and they read. They're a band. They're band guys who learn songs, who make songs, who learn songs." And so we upped that rehearsal experience, and some of the other guys would show up, and next thing you know, we went and recorded it live at the NAMM show. It turned out pretty good, didn't it? I mean, what you hear is what you get. You know, no overdubs. That was it. Everything live. Yeah.
I love those versions, and listeners and viewers should definitely seek that out. It's from like 2006 or something, I want to say.
Long time ago, yeah. Early 2000s, yeah. 15
some odd years ago, more than that. But
Farm for Morehead. Now, I called it Morehead for a reason, specific reason. I had an album out before that. And it was called It Up, and that was another live recording. And we recorded it at La Vallée, a little club that used to be on Sunset on Ventura Boulevard, and it had the cover of that album was a photograph of the back of my head. Oh no, yeah, it was the front of my head with steam coming off of it. No, it was the back of my head with steam coming off of it, and the way that they filmed that, I had to go and take the photograph, and I was in Arizona, and the photographer said, "I want to get steam to come off your head." I went, how are you going to do that? It's Arizona. It's dry as a bone. You know, he said, I got a friend that's an ice sculptor, right? And he's got a huge refrigerator that he does his ice sculpting in. I said, okay, so we go over to this guy's ice sculpting place, and he gets a bucket of hot water, and he puts the towel in the hot water, and then he put it on my head, wrapped it on my head like that, and let it sit there for a bit, whipped it off, and then the steam flew off in the freezer. The steam flew off my head, and he took a photograph of it. Yeah. So the next photograph that I used to that album, the girlfriend took a photograph of the back of my head sweating when I was playing. So that's why I called it Morehead.
With
Not what you thought.
A little bit of a double entendre. Yeah, right.
Not what you thought.
Yeah. But you got the front and the back of the head, parts 1 and 2. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, you know, the other Average White Band songs, I mean, I have at least 5 or 6 that are very favorites, but Person to Person is one too. And you obviously have an affinity for that one too, because you keep playing it.
I didn't even record the original one of that. That was Robbie. Yeah. Yeah.
The rhythm guitar in Average White Band was so key. And I think a lot of people that do funk also, you talk about putting too much in the spaces, but I think a lot of them also don't give enough attention to that rhythm guitar.
Yeah, there was, it was all about parts, you know, it was, and I think maybe we learned that from listening to Motown. There was, they all, those, you know, you hear people talking about those Motown sessions. There was like 3 guitarists all over there, and they said they'd be like little crows talking to each other, you know, figuring out their parts. And you know, Steve Cropper was the same sort of thing. He would have parts. When you listen to Booker T and the MGs, he and Duck just locked together in their parts that they played, you know. And there's always like a little bit more to them than what you think there is, you know. Yeah, you kind of think that it's one thing, but if you actually listen to it, there's other stuff that goes on. I think it's hip hugger. Do 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 dick dum do 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 dick dum do 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 dick dum. You know, it's just a little bit odd. Most people think do 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 dick dum. It's like with pick up the pieces. I mean, the number of times that I've sat down with the band and play pick up the pieces, and the guitarist to play. And I say, what's that? And they say, that's pick up the pieces. And like, that's not pick up the pieces. He said, yes, it is pick up the pieces. No, it's not pick up the pieces. It's not. That's not even in pick up the pieces. Anywhere in pick up the pieces. It's it's a subtle difference, but it makes the world a difference when you play it. Yeah.
The little nuances make such a huge difference.
Yeah, it's just a little thing. And it's like, it could have been, it was like, make that a funky chicken. You know, funky chicken, just that little blue note in there.
Is there one or two AWB performances that just stand out to you that were especially just unforgettable because maybe you guys were just so in a zone, or maybe something special happened?
Average White Band?
Yeah.
There was a lot. That happened a lot of times. I had a lot, but I mean, the one that really stands out for me is the one that made up most of the live album was when we played in Cleveland. It was where they used to play basketball. It was kind of in between Cleveland and somewhere else. They had an old arena. They tore it down now. They play in town the basketball, but there was a big basketball arena there, and we did this gig. And it was I think we recorded four live performances over the course of a year, and one was Philadelphia, I know, Philadelphia, Cleveland. I forget what the other two were, But that gig in Cleveland that night was magic night. But there was the extended version of Pick Up the Pieces, and everybody gets a solo. Everybody liked their solo from a different town. And so we was in the studio with Arif, and Arif was like, I don't know. We didn't play with click tracks or anything like that. It was just us playing. He said, I tell you what, let's make a 2-track of it and edit it together, see if it'll work. So he made a 2-track of all these different solos. And Gene Paul went in there with his razor blade, not like you can do now with this sort of thing. Get the old computer out and move the cursor around and edit. And I'll be danged if the whole thing didn't, each solo slot right in there. We're pretty good. Pretty good band. Pretty consistent.
Oh, wow. How did you feel when the band when things wound down for the band and you moved on to other stuff? How did you feel about that?
Well, it was there were a number of different reasons why that happened. We'd at a certain point we stopped. We left Atlantic Records and we were taken to Arista. And personally, I was quite happy to stay at Atlantic, but our manager thought that we could do better at Arista, and we went and did a record there. Nothing much happened. There was a song on there that we wanted to be the single, but they didn't release it as a single. It was What You Gonna Do For Me, and we were about to do another album for them, and we started to get sent these songs that basically sounded like songs that Barry Manilow had written that he didn't want to play. And I think they were trying to turn us into Air Supply or something, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't what any of us wanted. I don't think any of us wanted to do. There was an element of trying to appease the label by writing a hit that sounded like the last piece of shit that was number one. And I just wanted to make music like we made music until we hit the one that would work, And I guess times were changing. And I didn't want to do it anymore, and Hamish didn't want to do it anymore, and so it stopped. And it was very sad. It wasn't an easy, not an easy decision to make by any means. But I think it was one that I couldn't have gone on. I couldn't have gone on like that. With the band. I mean, there would have come a moment when we recorded something that we hated that became a hit record, and then we'd have to play it for the rest of our lives. I can deal with that. I can play Pick Up the Pieces and Schoolboy Crush and Person to Person and all those songs. I have no problem playing them at all. I can play them anytime. And I don't think that there's a song that I wouldn't want to play, except for the last couple of albums that we did on Arista, and Shine included. I just it just doesn't sound like the band. It doesn't sound like what the band would do. And that's I became disenchanted. Hamish became disenchanted. I think everybody sort of got a little bit, fed up with it. And band died, basically.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.